سلوان لا سلوان محمود
سبعة
يا فندم بس الانسان دي واحده ثانيه المشكله السياسيه اللي انت عارف بنتكلم عليها بحاول اشيل فرصه عشان الست ما تقعدش لو جت الست الاولانيه مش عايزه تقعد مع الست لو جت الدكتوره هاله الدكتوره اللي منها بعد سنه ست الدكتوره هاله الدكتوره ياسمين انا سلوان طبعا بس الدكتوره ياسمين Hello. Karim Rafat. I'm going to be the moderator. Nice to have you. Thanks.
صباح الخير جميعا. بعد اذن حضراتكم لو نقدر بس الساده المصورين لو بعد اذنكم حضراتكم خطوتين كده للخلف عشان بس الناس تقدر تتابع الجلسه. Good morning everyone. If you allow me, I'm going to do some very quick housekeeping rules. I'm doing a voice test. Can everyone in the back of the room hear me quite well? Very good. If you allow me, good morning everyone. My name is Karim Rafat. I'm the chairman of Engage Consulting. We're a public policy and government affairs firm. I'm extremely honored to have been granted this chance to be your moderator today for the first half of this panel. Today is an iconic day for all of us. I think Solutions Day will happen to prove itself and impose itself and as one of the most important days of COP27. I'm extremely honored by the chance given to us by the Ministry of Planning, led by Her Excellency Dr. Hala Said, to be with you tonight, this morning. I'm sorry. Please keep your phones on silent mode to avoid any disruptions. We will be discussing a lot of things in Solutions Day: greening budgets, entrepreneurship, role of women, sustainable cities, and everything. And I think there is no better person to lay the ground in this honorable panel than Her Excellency Dr. Hala El Said, Minister of Planning and Economic Development of the Arab Republic of Egypt. Your Excellency, تفضلي فندم.
Thank you, Karim. Good morning, Excellencies, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all in the city of charm and peace, city of Sharm el-Sheikh. And I would like to express my deepest appreciation to our esteemed panelists for joining us in commencing the Solutions Day on the margins of COP27. Today and every day, we meet with the eyes of the future upon us and profound questions before us. Sharm el-Sheikh must be the emblem of a new decade, a decade of implementation and innovation to drive forward a promising and thriving future. Over the past days, partners and global leaders from all over the world have been engaging in discussions around a myriad of topics along the various thematic days, with one global topic in mind: implementation. Today we gather to conclude COP27 with an all-hands-on-deck effort for the most pressing and defining theme of the summit, Solutions Day. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, reports accentuated the urgent need for bold, ambitious, and innovative solutions to address climate change and achieve the objective of the UNFCCC and its Paris Agreement. As we embark on this great collective journey, we'll endeavor to reach the furthest behind first, recognizing that dignity of the human person is fundamental. Building on the outcomes of the previous thematic days discussions, Solutions Day brings together a wide array of stakeholders, including policymakers, private sector companies, civil society organizations, entrepreneurs, academia, and international development partners to collectively forge innovative solutions for a better future for all. This day will provide a platform for all stakeholders to share and discuss best practices and lessons learned, and design together integrated solutions focusing on 5 interrelated sub-themes: sustainable cities, sustainable transport, private sector and entrepreneurship, ICT, innovation and technology, and waste management. Moving under the umbrella of the Egyptian presidency's vision for COP27, Together for Implementation, today we'll witness the launch of several highly important initiatives across a diversity of sectors. such as waste management, sustainable urban resilience, and sustainable urban transports. One of the initiatives that I'm very proud to announce in the coming session is Friends of Greening National Investment Plans in Africa and Developing Countries by the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development, supported by the UNDP, which translates our strategy that puts efficient and integrated solutions at the start of the journey of planning. And we have also His Excellency Minister of Planning of Pakistan, who is joining this initiative. We are also witnessing the signing of Egypt's first direct investment company in emissions offsetting, EGCOP, which reflects the annual global demand for carbon offsets and a booming carbon market. Today's session will also showcase case studies and success stories that could be replicated in other countries, such as the village of Faris in Aswan, the first village to become green, and to receive the Tarshid Green certification by the first Green Building Council in Egypt. Ladies and gentlemen, to achieve the objectives of 2030 Agenda, we need holistic and coherent cross-sectoral policies that address the dual partnership and relationship between climate change and development. We also need to ensure that we adopt a global lens in public governance and policies, as countries today are connected by a common thread. The more we act with solidarity, the more lives will improve. In a fast-paced world, we also need to keep an eye on technological advancement and its role in combating climate change. Boosting partnerships with the private sector is an economic imperative, as it fosters technological transfer and also knowledge exchange, which we are deemed as essential ingredients to enhance the resilience of cities and countries. In tandem with this, addressing climate change is a collaborative process. No matter the size or the scale of government's efforts, they need to be complemented by multi-stakeholder partnership in order to witness tangible progress. In this respect, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude for all partners who participated with Ministry of Planning and Economic Development in bringing the Solutions Days rich side events and sessions to COP27. Finally, one day definitely is not enough. Dealing with climate change is a lengthy and continuous process. However, our encounter today is a unique opportunity, so let us make the best use out of it to learn from each other's experiences and more forcefully and steadily towards action and implementation translated into innovative and efficient solutions. Once again, thank you all for joining us, and I invite you all to stay for the next session and attend the announcement of the Greening National Investment Plans in Africa and Developing Countries Initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thank you, of course, on behalf of everyone for your tireless efforts for COP27. It is now an utmost personal pleasure to introduce His Excellency Sameh Shoukry, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Arab Republic of Egypt and President of COP27.
Good morning to all. It's my pleasure to be with you this morning in this opening of the COP27 Solutions Day, the last of the COP27 presidency initiatives, thematic days that have run through the entire conference and provided the necessary space to tackle a number of relevant and important topics related to our efforts to address climate change. As the name suggests, Solution Day is about the broad array of new, holistic, innovative and cross-cutting approaches and measures to the ongoing climate crisis the world is facing. With this focus on implementation, it is only appropriate that COP27 dedicates specific attention to climate solutions that presents an opportunity to address climate change, while also providing pathways to sustainable development. Sustainable cities, clean mobility and transport, integrated waste management, nature-based solutions, among others, are but some of these practical and effective actions that have great potential to enhance our response to the climate crisis and adapt to its impacts. Ladies and gentlemen, Addressing climate change and its global impacts requires a participatory approach, engaging multiple stakeholders, including governments, the private sector, civil society, regional and international organizations, as well as development partners, with the aim of finding innovative solutions that respond to the specific circumstances and the needs of all countries, especially in Africa and the developing world. Solution Day here at COP27 will provide an opportunity for an interactive dialogue and a meaningful exchange of experience, best practices, lessons learned, and success stories, as well as providing a space for engagement and networking for entrepreneurs and small businesses from developing countries. I trust that you will all benefit from the exchanges, discussions, and deliberations that will take place today. And I look forward to the COP27 presidency initiatives that will also be launched in relation to climate solutions and that provide complementary pathways to enhance global climate action and ensure that countries are able to fulfill their NDCs and meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. I'm sure that the discussions today will be enlightening and will be impactful and will provide the necessary opportunity, provided that the wind doesn't disrupt us. But certainly I want to convey my appreciation to Dr. Saeed and all of the panelists who are participating today. And unfortunately, as usual, as we come to a close of the COP, there are several responsibilities I have to take care of. So I will unfortunately not have the privilege of remaining with you, but I will, I'm sure, get a full report of all of the good deliberations and the outcomes of this important day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We'll give it just a moment for His Excellency to... دكتورة هالة اتفضلي يا فندم. اتفضل يا دكتور. أنا آسف. اتفضل. اتفضل حضرتك. لا أنا يا دكتور أنا بس عايز أغير دكتور ياسمين. اتفضل حضرتك هنا يا دكتور ياسمين بعدين حضرتك أنا بس كنت عايز أغير الأماكن. Thank you very much. I'll now move to another moment of honor for myself. It's the second time. I'm extremely lucky to introduce Her Excellency, Mr. Yasmin Fouad, Minister of Environment of Egypt.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning and a good day to all of you. It is our last day of the thematic days, but as they always say, we're saving the best for the last. From 2015 to 2020, the figures that came to us on the number of droughts, of floods, and of showers that came were more than 74 around the world, but more than 114 countries that were affected by the wild fires, especially in forests. And that up to 2020. 2022, as you all know, had witnessed a devastating dramatic catastrophe for most of the countries that were facing the extreme weather events. From that perspective, Egypt was very keen not only to discuss sectoral issues, but to dedicate a full day for the first time for solutions to those issues. And we have been very much enthusiastic about planning that Solutions Day in bringing everyone on board. If climate change is a catastrophe and a crisis that hits hard everyone, then everyone has to be on board with us. The business community, the partners from the international organization, the civil society, the entrepreneurs, the women, and even the government. And that's how it was tactically planned, including also the sectors. Throughout the day, as Minister Hala has mentioned, there will be a number of initiatives such as sustainable cities, and that was very important to keep that balance between mitigation and adaptation, and how best can we keep our infrastructure more resilient. When we're talking about the transport and the e-mobility, the government of Egypt was really very keen when it holds a COP and gives the slogan, a COP for implementation, to let you see that by yourself. And that's how we changed the Sharm el-Sheikh to be with an e-mobility. So whatever we're discussing in the closed room, we can see that. So leading by example also is a slogan that we're trying to put further into that part. Solutions, if we look at them, they are not only low emission pathways, but they are an open window into the creativity and innovation. It gives us great pleasure to listen to all the sectors and all the stakeholders into that pathway, because that's the only way we can revert climate change and fight the extreme weather event. Even when we have been working on receiving proposals, I recall that Minister Hala has been receiving a lot of proposals that how we can match all that from 9 till 6, and maybe 80 proposals. So part of that, because we're very keen also to hear the voices that are not heard within the formal UNFCCC process, we have opened up the green zone. The same thematic day that is taking place here, we're giving the opportunity for the youth, for the private sector, for the indigenous people, as well as the women, to bring their ideas and solutions that will also be collected throughout the day. If we come last on the transition to a green economy, is it really a difficult equation and a challenge that countries will not be able to achieve? Does it hit hard the economic process of the country and slow down the sustainable economic growth? No, the figures shows the contrary, because the gains that would come into the transition to a green economy would reach $26 trillion by 2030. If we would like to translate that to figures, we would find that we will be adding to the market a new of 65 million jobs. But much more, we are securing the infrastructure in countries with a 4.2 trillion each year that are being secured just by looking at solutions and how resilient infrastructure is doing. So based on that, we think that the Solutions Day would provide a huge opportunity. We will be continuing as COP presidency on all the initiatives. There is a lot of initiatives that will be announced today, and we would like to engage more with partners, more with government, and much more with the private sector and the civil society, because we are a true believer that together for implementation will only be done if we are all together, but a good believer and have a good dedication and committed pathway that we will be able to fight against climate change and win that fight together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'll now move to introduce His Excellency Selwyn Hart, Special Advisor to the Secretary General on Climate Action and Just Transition. Please, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good morning. And first, at the outset, let me thank the distinguished minister for the invitation, and also to fully congratulate the government of Egypt for really ensuring that COP27 was a truly inclusive COP. It was a COP where all voices have been heard, from governments, businesses, civil society, and from the private sector and financial institutions. And a COP that really focused on very practical and tangible ways of ensuring that the developing world, and in particular Africa, that the developing world is not left behind as the world embarks on this really important transition to a climate resilient net zero future. A lot of this as well goes to my colleague and friend Mahmoud, who has truly been a champion for this inclusive approach. He's certainly been a champion for ambitious climate action. We all know what the science says. We are in trouble. every indicator on climate is heading in the wrong direction. And this will require an acceleration of climate action, an acceleration of ambition across the board, in every sector, in every region, and in every country. And it will require having all aspects of global and domestic society and the economy fully engaged. Quite simply, it requires all hands on deck. And therefore, activities like this, which bring together governments with representatives from the private sector, civil society, and ordinary people, are absolutely essential in designing a way forward for us to address the existential challenge on climate. We also know that we are living in a world of growing inequalities, where inequalities between the global haves and the global have-nots are widening as a result of the COVID crisis and the response from the COVID crisis. We also know that in terms of energy security and energy prices, developing countries are particularly disadvantaged. Despite Africa possessing about 60% of the global solar capacity, it simply it receives about 1% of investments in solar investments. We need to change these equations, and events and activities like this are absolutely crucial in showcasing and highlighting what needs to be done to ensure that the transition is fair, to ensure that there's climate justice embedded in the transition to a net zero future, and that no continent, no country, no individual is left behind during this transition. This is an absolute priority for the Secretary General and us within the United Nations system. Throughout the course of the last 2 weeks, you've seen how we've partnered with the government of Egypt and will continue to partner with the government of Egypt. As we move from COP to COP, it is absolutely essential that we never lose sight of the ultimate objective of this work. It is about people. Yes, it is about preserving the planet, but ultimately it is about people and improving the lives and livelihoods of individuals. So quite simply, we will continue to support Egypt. We will continue to work with you even after the COP is over to ensure that what was launched here is carried forward in a meaningful and a very inclusive way. So congratulations, thank you, and you can be assured that the United Nations remains a trusted partner.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. You have very well outlined the magnitude of the challenge. Let me tell you, we all felt the magnitude of the challenge when we were preparing for the COP, but we were extremely reconforted because we had no one less than His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Mohiuddin, United Nations Climate Change Special Envoy for Egypt and United Nations Special Envoy on financing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Dr. Mahmoud, once more, it's an extreme honor to present Hadratak. The floor is yours.
Right. Thank you so much for the kind invitation to be part of this panel. I listened carefully to the excellent interventions by the honorable ministers of Foreign Affairs, Planning and Environment, and the good words of my good friend, Mr. Selwyn Hart. And as mentioned by Dr. Yasmin Fouad, keeping the best for last and starting in the very first day on the thematic days with finance and implementation. I think we are really trying to capture what is required for implementation in this implementation COP. One area of interest, because the two ministers and Selwyn mentioned people and the impact on the people. It is really still worrying that globally the level of awareness is not really as could be required for serious implementation in the field. Mentioned before the outcomes of some polls and surveys by the likes of Gallup, and telling us that only half of the world, or to be exact, 51%, are aware of the climate crisis. This needs to change, because one of the areas of implementation will rely very much on behavioral change, not just at the leadership level, which requires really a great deal of attention, but for the common people, those who are being impacted in their areas of work and life day to day, that they need really to be more aware of the implications of the climate crisis. And I think the solution should start from here, by raising awareness and by getting that through education systems, by more involvement by the media. And actually, for those who know more about the topic, perhaps when they speak to the general public, they should really abandon the use of complicated terminologies and brag too much about their sophisticated knowledge of this area. And bringing closer to the people what we need to have more on areas related to mitigation, for it to be areas on the work on energy, on matters related. Yes, I have all the pleasure and honor to have Her Excellency the Minister from Germany, of course. Yeah, thank you.
With your permission, Your Excellency, we're very happy to welcome Her Excellency Mrs. Annalena Baerbock, Federal Minister for Foreign Affairs from Germany. Your Excellency, you're welcome. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And joining us this time, we're talking about behavioral change, and I'll come to some matters of relevance to the leadership of Germany as a member of G7, G20, and beyond. So the first thing then is basic about behavioral change. Part of the work could really come from the regulatory changes. That's why we welcomed on the champions on the non-state actor, the very important report led by Minister McKenna, the former Minister of Climate and Environment of Canada, and the implications of that on the standards, verification, disclosure of information. And I'm happy that the leadership of the United Nations Secretary General have been behind this important work. And as I said on the launching of this report, this is a kind of report that will have a before and after. So the world for business, for finance, for disclosure is not going to be as it was before. So hopefully we can deal with matters related to greenwashing when it comes to this issue. Then on the changes as well, I'm happy that we have more and more involvement by universities, research centers, think tanks, and leaders of thought and knowledge to support the work in climate change and getting that closer to the operations. And as I said, if you go to places like Benban in Egypt, Ras Gharib, Za'farana, to see the solar and wind farms, they are products of inventions, they are products of innovation, and they are products of investments at scale. So it's between the American inventions, the European innovation, and Chinese scale production, and of course the ability of Egyptian talents and engineers to adapt that all to the requirements of the local community. Without research, science, and support, will not just have the solutions that we are after. So it's not just about finance, it's indeed about finance and behavioral change, all supported by research, science, and development. This gets me into this tricky topic on finance. The work by Nick Stern and Vera Songwe, as commissioned by the Presidency's COP26, COP27, telling us the 100 billion is just a drop. I wouldn't say a drop in an ocean, but could be a drop in a small pool. Because we need at least 10 times this figure in order to enhance the work. And this figure of the $1 trillion is the external finance requirements for developing economies and emerging markets alone, getting an assumption into place that OECD countries and getting OECD countries and China away from the equation here because they assume that they will take care of it. The performance of leading economies, the performance of advanced countries, those who mastered lecturing the rest of the world about the importance of climate, but very little when it comes to contributions, needs really to be revised, because without finance we'll be just talking in circles about what should be required. I'm happy that the minister from Germany is sitting next to my right, because in this particular aspect, the 100 billion, Germany did better than others, because it's not fair as well to say that advanced economies, all of them didn't deliver, because 7 out of 23 did well. Germany is included in that list. France, Holland, Japan, and a couple of Nordic countries. But the rest of the 23 countries are with pathetic contributions. Some of them are as little as 5% of their fair share. So I think we need here in this collaborative approach, especially from the non-state actors side, the business community and the private sector cannot do their work without the support, and the 100 billion is an old promise that is becoming now more important and critical. And some of us have been listening as well to the President-elect, President Lula of Brazil, talking about the issue as being a serious one. And we cannot really trust the promise of 1 trillion if the 100 billion is not delivered. And I hope that this will change. And perhaps through the leadership of Germany in the different circles, in Europe, in G7, in G20, and beyond, that I said, that may need really to change. Because actually, when the Secretary General talks, and properly so, about deficit in trust, and I would add from my side, in times of surplus of crises, without finance, collaboration, research and development, and support in the field, we will be meeting again and again and again, talking about the same thing, because without finance and investment, matters are going to be compromised. This gets me into my final points about how to get that all into investments. Egypt, on the substance of this summit, brought the attention of many people who are outside the camp of climate by breaking this taboo and the misunderstanding that climate is something very different from what we are talking about when it comes to sustainable development, or trying to solve the problems of energy or food crisis, or matters related to jobs and opportunities. Bringing just transition into the work, bringing the adaptation agenda of Sharm el-Sheikh with its different areas of work, and this is basically, as mentioned by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, this is the thing that next week we'll be starting working on the operationalization of the 7 areas of work: food, water, human settlements, good it was mentioned by the 2 ministers now, oceans, infrastructure, cross-cutting planning, and cross-cutting finance. Getting into the regional work, Egypt led a very practical way of getting the UN system, the regional economic commissions, and the GFAN, the private sector, together to build up a pipeline of projects. So for the sophisticated elite in finance, when they say and brag that the developing economies and emerging markets do not have pipeline of projects, they need to go and check the evidence that there is a very extensive list of projects that could really be worthy of their attention, including a very important project that came from Pakistan in the Indus River, presented by Her Excellency, the Minister of Environment, to us, and this could be one good opportunity. This comes from big projects like the one in Pakistan, or smaller projects, but owned as well by small states, like the electrification of traffic system in a small island. This would require the work of investors, but without leveraging, without support of the G7, G20, and the MDBs, that will not really happen. But the list is there and the promise is there. So we need to have good outcomes on the whole matter. Then I think we'll have the opportunity to discuss this innovative project on localization of climate action. Again, this is about raising awareness and a pipeline of projects and celebrating great minds and great efforts at the local level on the Egyptian governorates. One is very proud to see how able entrepreneurs, young women, mega projects as well included, to demonstrate how they are seriously taking green and smart solutions into the field, and they seek partnerships. The final point, again, this will be on the finance, and there are lots of sessions today on the finance, so I'll just say something that perhaps in a good day of God that could really be embraced by those who control the IFIs, including the leading economies. We cannot, in this world that suffers from a financial system that is insufficient, unfair, and I would say as well, very inefficient, that we need to continue doing that, assuming that we're doing the right thing. So I think we need really to change the terms and conditions. Developing economies and emerging markets are required today to borrow to fix problems that had been resulting from malpractices since the first industrial revolution. Solutions are there. We cannot just mourn what happened in the past, but if we are serious about energy solutions, adaptation solutions, and dealing with the file of loss and damage, we have practical ideas. One of them is to do the following. We have the MDBs, the multilateral development banks. We need to consider financing for low-income and developing economies of low-middle income like Pakistan and Egypt. And the terms should be the following. 10 years grace, 20 years on finance after the grace period, and then 1% maximum to cover administrative cost and technical capacity building. Is that far-fetched? No. My good sister, Kristalina Georgieva, is doing something similar through the Resilience and Sustainability Trust Funds. Actually, the grace period there is 10.5 years. The cost is much higher, but it covers middle-income and low-income countries. If we're serious about climate action and climate implementation, it's about, again, those three areas of work. Behavioral change, getting science, research, and development seriously, but again, it's finance, investment, and project development. Having said that, in the Solutions Day that's ending the thematic days here, I think we're all energized to start working in partnerships, public-private, domestic and external, developing economies with advanced economies, because we are all in it together. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Dr. Mohiddin, allow me to tell you this on behalf of every Egyptian who's worked on COP. You have been really a source of enlightenment to every one of us until the very last day in the Solutions Day, pushing us to our limits, giving us new ideas, and giving us direction. I really thank you on behalf of everyone. And I'd like to take from what you said to introduce Her Excellency Minister Baerbock, Federal Minister of Germany. I think Dr. Mahmoud Mohiddin told you you've done better than others, and I think there is no better way to pave the way for your kind remarks. Please.
Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, even when the flood subsides, we don't have anywhere to go. No food, no money to buy cement, no money to rent a new house. Those are the words of Habibat Lawal from Nigeria. Parts of her country are underwater. 1.4 million Nigerians had to leave just recently their homes. Many have been killed by the floods. It is a blatant injustice. People like Habibat, people from Nigeria, from Somalia, from Pakistan, suffer tremendously from the climate crisis, even though they have contributed next to nothing to its creation. That is why Germany is putting climate justice at the top of our agenda. I know that many of you, especially the Pacific Island states, have been calling for this for almost 3 decades. Today, I'm here to tell you, as the German foreign ministers, we hear you and we have understood. I still remember myself, my first COP in Paris in 2015. Back then, I was a parliamentarian. Back then, many of the island states, many NGOs many also parliamentarians like me, we were fighting very hard for the industrialized countries to even talk about loss and damage, to acknowledge it as an issue. But again and again, I know many of you ran against walls. Now at COP27, at this Solution Day, the issue is a key subject in the negotiation rooms. Finally. And therefore, I call on everyone, let us seize this opportunity. Let's not waste time urging and arguing about mechanisms that reflect the world from 1992, while we already live in 2022 in a 1.2 degree world. Let us take up our responsibility. That is why we are here as politicians, as world leaders. Let us stand up for the damage the emissions of all major emitters have caused to people like Habibat. But there are thousands like people like Habibat. So therefore, let's work on concrete measures. Let's work on concrete solutions. Let's work on building a mosaic of finance that really helps people and that really helps the most vulnerable and not helps our bad conscience. This is not about charity. This is a question of justice, a question of safety for all our common future. And I want to be crystal clear, yes, this will cost a lot of money. We are not stepping down from our obligation to reach 100 billion US dollars in climate finance. Thank you for highlighting, because I know that we haven't done our homework hard enough, but we are there yet. So thank you for appreciating this. Germany is raising its contribution to 6 billion euro per year. But even the 100 billion are just a drop in the ocean when we look at what is needed. Together with the private sector, we have to shift trillions into the right channels. At the moment, our global financial architecture is not fit for this purpose. Because we are talking about solution, we have to talk also about this. Barbados has been proposing innovative ideas for reforms, and we want to follow up on these proposals. But working towards big visions also means moving forward with concrete actions, as many of you have said already, on the ground to help people cope with the crisis now, because part of the crisis is already there. We will therefore set up a global shield against climate risk, not as an excuse for something else, but to help now. People like Habibat cannot wait that we have fixed a new instrument in the future. They need our support now. And therefore, we presented it here at the COP, and we would like to encourage other countries to pay their share for losses and damages. It finances specific projects, for example, this is totally concrete, buying new seeds for farmers who have lost their income during periods of droughts. In Uzbekistan, we are supporting, for example, water-saving irrigation canals. These dripping techniques save 50% of usual water. This canal is quite literally a lifeline for her whole region. It is a solution like this that we want to support. And this is why I'm happy to announce today that Germany will contribute another 60 million euro to the adaptation fund. To reduce further damage, we also need more ambition in reducing emissions. The brutal Russian war in Ukraine hasn't put us off course. On the contrary. By 2030, Germany will increase the share of renewable energy mix to 80%. The era of fossil fuels is coming to an end, and we play an active part in this. And we are also helping other partners transition to green energy. In Africa alone, and many of you know better, half of the population has no regular access to electricity. We talked about this already in 2015. So we have to deliver also on this. Changing that in a climate-friendly way will be an enormous challenge. But again, it is concrete steps that turn grand visions into reality. Therefore, we have launched a Just Energy Transition Partnership with South Africa, setting up an investment plan to help to shift to green energies. And we invite other countries also to join in this JET piece. This also helps to create alternative jobs for people who depend so far on coal mining. This partnership is a model we would like to expand. On Tuesday, together with our G20 partners, we secured groundbreaking climate targets and associated financing with Indonesia. By 2030, at least 34% of all Indonesia's power generation will come from renewable energy. With flagship projects like that, we are building the future with renewables, instead of rebuilding the past with oil, diesel, and gas. Yes, we need also economic development, but we don't have to repeat the mistakes industrialized countries did. Now it's up to us, for our responsibility, to use all the projects, all the tools, all the instruments which are already there. And then call on all of us to come up with ambitious finance plans, with ambitious project plans, but also with ambitious mitigation plans. And I would like to be also very clear on this. We will keep the 1.5 degree only alive if we reduce emissions not in 2030, 40, 50, 60, but reduce emissions right now. This is why for us the question of finance and an ambition working program on mitigation are two sides of the same coin. If we are not delivering now, within the next 8 years, within this decade, we are not talking about a 1.5 degree world anymore. We probably don't find enough money on the whole world to cover all the loss and damage. And this is why for us, an ambitious plan for mitigation for this decade is so crucial. Ladies and gentlemen, we only have a few hours or maybe a few days left at this COP27. And for these last hours, I all urge on you. When you sit down at the negotiation table, think of Habibat from Nigeria, who has nowhere to go. Think of the 2,077 people in India who died this year due to extreme weather events. And think of the effects the climate crisis is having on people in your own country, because we feel this climate crisis in every country of our world. These people can't wait until next year. They definitely cannot wait until 2030 or 2050. These people need us to deliver solutions now. So I urge you, all the answers are there, let us deliver. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. I would like to thank Your Excellency. I think there is no better and strong words. You mentioned three things that I'd like to recap before ending this first part of this segment, of high-level segment. It is not charity. It is about responsibility. We need concrete, and it's going to cost a lot of money. Thank you very much for reminding all of us of those four key things on these things. I would like now to start introducing the next part of this morning, we're going to start introducing the key initiatives in Solutions Day, one of the most important of which is an initiative entitled Friends of Greening National Investment Plans in Africa and Developing Country Initiatives. I would like to welcome on the stage His Excellency Ahsan Iqbal, Federal Minister of Planning, Development and Special Initiatives of Pakistan, Your Excellency. And I would like to also welcome His Excellency Michel Menga Missoni, Minister of Decentralization, Cohesion and Development of Territories of Gabon. We're very honored to have you. And finally, my friend Alessandro Fracassetti, United Nations Development Program Resident Representative in Cairo. Please. Thank you, Lexi. I'll just allow it one chance. Thank you very much, everyone. So Doctor, I would like to just give everyone the comfort in the room. I'm not going to be the one boring you for the remainder of the day. The session is not going to be moderated by myself. After the introductory remarks, it is my dear Shireen Zorba, head of the Global Secretariat of the UN Science Policy Business Forum, a UN leading multi-sector body on environment, who's going to be taking care of moderating this panel. I'd like to thank her for making my life easier, because I'm not very good at moderating technical matters. So thank you for taking that role afterwards. Dr. Saeed, please, the floor is yours to introduce.
Thank you very much, Karim. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to welcome you again, all to the announcement of our initiative, Friends of Greening National Investment Plans in Africa and Developing Countries Initiative. I would like to seize this opportunity to welcome our initiative's partners from various countries, as well as regional and international organizations, financial institutions, and I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all our partners, and especially UNDP, for their outstanding support in this initiative. So thank you, Alessandro, and all the UNDP team. Your participation and involvement are extremely important, since we need to work collaboratively towards finding solutions to tackle climate change, in light of the fact that developing countries, especially in Africa, are the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change under all climate scenarios, despite that the continent contributes the least to the GHG emissions. Governments need to shape their economic policies and national investments in a manner that factors in climate change. In this vein, greening national investment plans is one of the powerful solutions to help all parties meet the objectives of the UNFCCC and its Paris Agreement, as well as support the implementation of the NDCs in the context of achieving sustainable development and poverty eradication. This initiative, Greening the National Investment Plan, capitalizes on the different success stories and best practices of all our partners. In this regard, Egypt has its own success story. In 2019, and following a participatory approach, Egypt launched the Environmental Sustainability Criteria Guidelines, with the objective of shifting the paradigm of both the government and the private sector towards accelerating the transition to green economy, expediting green recovery, and increasing the share of green projects in the investment plan. We need to have guidelines for all. We started by public institutions. Since Ministry of Planning disperses the public investment to different ministries, we needed first to start with the public institutions, and then we had these guidelines in partnership with the Ministry of Environment, and we had a lot of capacity building to all government institutions, ministries, and public institutions. And then we shared these guidelines with the private sector, because we wanted these guidelines to become the national guidelines for Egypt, and also we are happy to share them also with the banks And I am happy to have Dr. Dalia as the head of the sustainable unit at the Federation of Egyptian Banks that will also adopt this with the banks as the main financial intermediaries for development across the country. In 2020-2021, the share of green projects reached 15% of our national investment plan. In the current year, with the increase and enhancement of capacity building and the monitoring and evaluation, we are about to reach this year 40% of our projects become green, and we target to reach 50% by the year 24-25. This is through investments in clean mobility, water resource management, and the minister was mentioning the lining of canals, and the government of Egypt has spent almost 50 billion Egyptian pounds the past 2 years in lining of canals to rationalize the use of water, new modern techniques of irrigation also to rationalize the use of water in irrigation, in addition to reuse of water and water desalination projects that we are doing with the private sector and with the support of the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Egypt as the investment arm of the government. So water resource management, waste management, renewable energy and energy efficiency, in addition to all projects that are adopted at the level of the Decent Life, the rural villages and the Decent Life initiative. Capitalizing on this success story and other success stories, the rationale of the initiative is to shape the process of planning and designing economic policies in a matter that factors in the impact of climate change, quantifies the efforts made in mitigation and adaptation, and identifies the gaps and the support that is needed by different partners. What should the Friends of the Initiative be doing? The Friends of the Initiative shall together pledge to voluntarily increase the share of green projects in their national investment plans by at least 30 to 40% by the year 2030. They should track and monitor public investments directed to climate action and identify gaps and support needed. 3, establish a knowledge sharing platform and a capacity building hub to have the best practices, lessons learned, and develop tools and methodologies supporting the efforts to green national investment plan. And finally, advocate and raise awareness for this cause that I believe can be an efficient solution for climate action. And I also see that this initiative goes very much in line with the Decent Life for Climate Resilient Africa and also for the women that Dr. Maya has launched a few days ago on the African Women Initiative for a Climate Sensitive Initiative. The initiative shall ensure a wide and multidisciplinary participation of different partners and relevant stakeholders, and opt to have a simple governance structure that comprises an advocacy group of friends composed mainly of member states with an assigned member state as a lead coordinator for the initiative, which rotates on a biannual basis. A group of partners of the initiative encompassing different international and regional organizations, private sector, banks, and financial institutions, and think tanks. The participatory approach is one that we followed from the beginning of the initiative, as we held consultations engaging various stakeholders, as well as a number of one-to-one meetings, which led to reaching this moment of announcing the initiative. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the participation of our distinguished panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor. I will now, for the sake of a bit of diversity, I would like to allow Alessandro to give us a few remarks regarding the initiative. Alessandro Fracassetti, United Nations Development Program Resident Representative in Egypt. Alessandro.
Thank you very much. And Your Excellency, Dr. Hala Al Said, dear Mahmoud, dear Maya, all great partners in the government, excellencies, ministers, and all dear ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and privilege to be here with you today to launch this important initiative on greening national investment plans. And let me start really by congratulating all of you, and particularly the government here of Egypt, to making it to the last day of the Maastricht Days, the Days of Solutions. And this is a conference of implementation, we said it. So without solutions, there is no implementations. We at the UN Development Programme are about solutions. We are present in over 170 countries. We help with countries raise their climate ambitions and working on their development strategies, on their assessments, and then on implementation projects to make this solution come through. So thanks once again. Let me also, again, thanks Dr. Said for choosing UNDP as a partner to support this particular initiative. It's particularly important because, again, implementation goes through finances, finances go through national budgets. Often the narrative, when we work in development, is one, and then the budget narrative is another one. There has to be an integration between the two. By creating a much-needed forum for countries to share their experience and know-how on the public finance on green projects, this initiative will help countries support each other to design economic policies that take account the impact of climate change. And the crises of recent years have demonstrated the interconnectedness of our economies. I don't need to mention them here. We've had a fair share of those crises just in the last 2 or 3 years. And in the face of this crisis, there are growing calls across societies to build forward better, greener, and more inclusive economies. And the words before of Assistant Secretary General Selvin Hart about this having been an inclusive COP are particularly important, because none of this is possible without a whole of society approach. Each country's national pledge to cut emissions and adapt to climate change, as set out in their nationally determined contributions, constitute a unique blueprint for immediate climate action. And strong and quality NDCs provide a crucial bridge between national climate commitments and concrete actions. So financing these contributions is a major challenge, especially for developing countries, and we have heard from the previous speakers about it. In this context, it is important to note that while Africa, as we heard, is responsible for less greenhouse gas emissions than any other continent, it also includes some of the regions most vulnerable to the impact of climate change, and we are actually currently in one. And while adapting to climate change has been a priority by governments across Africa, most of these countries' commitments remain underfinanced. Just a few figures to set the stage for this discussion. According to the UN Environmental Programme, African countries today need $2 trillion to implement their national development contribution, national determined contributions. Drastic change in the policies and financing landscape are needed to deliver Africa's growing energy demands to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And achieving 100% energy access by 2030 in Africa will involve connecting 60 million people per year on average. And of this 2.8 trillion invested in renewables globally, between 2000 and 2020, only 2% went to Africa. Investing in climate action makes economic sense and drives sustainable development. Smart investments in relevant sectors to meet a country's NDC targets can stimulate near-term economic recoveries, set economies on course to lower emission, and improve climate resilience over the long term. Investments in renewable energy create 3 times as many jobs as equivalent investments in fossil fuels. And we'll tell you more. Investments in energy efficiency investments, something we've actually done together in Egypt here in the last decade, both on the electricity side, on renewables, create 5 times as many jobs. Early adaptation investments offer a 1 to 3 rate of returns over the next decades. So this means that a US 1.8 trillion investment in adaptation measures would bring a return of 7.1 trillion in avoided costs. And of course, we all have heard these large figures. I'm very proud that we have been able to support on Finance Day a number of discussions on how this large amount of funds can be shifted, as it was mentioned, to arrive to finance the countries that need it. We as UNDP have been urgently scaling up its support for countries to help them set up and strengthen existing policy and institutional enabling action and systems for NDC coordination and implementation. As part of a SDG budget reform agenda, UNDP has launched a guidance note for governments to integrate climate change into their budgeting. Naturally, one size does not fit all, of course, and countries vary in the level of development of their public financial management practices. But I insist, it all goes through budgeting. You need to SDGize the budget, you need to green the budgets. So transitioning to a low-carbon economy requires very significant changes in public budgets. And similarly, it is paramount to ensure public investment that are resilient to the effects of climate change. The initiative we are launching today will create a space for countries to share and advocate for the adoption of best practices for increasing the share of green projects in their national investment plan. And this is essential to ensure the adequate allocation of public resources to climate-sensitive projects and to facilitate the implementation of NDCs. Let me just say that Egypt has already taken important strides, as we've heard from Minister Al-Said, in greening its national investment plan, and has set an inspiring but feasible target of a 50% increase in the greening of its public investment by 2023 and 2024. So through this new initiative, the valuable experience Egypt has gained in advancing this transition is now being shared with other African and developing countries. And in country after country, we have witnessed the transformation that can be achieved when leadership, political will, and investment all come together. And these advances show that change really is possible. Once again, on behalf of the United Nations Development Programme, let me thank all national, regional, and global participants for their support in getting where we are today, and look forward to joining you in this significant advocacy initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. Before just moving on, I'd like to equally welcome on stage His Excellency Mahamat Asilek Halata, Minister of Urbanism of the Republic of Chad. Your Excellency, welcome. Thank you for being with us. Just one moment. I'm very happy that we're now starting to having an African panel. This is still the Egyptian African COP. And for the sake of commitment to gender, and because I do not know the issues technically, I'd welcome Shireen Zorba to do the rest of the panel. So please. Thank you very much. Now it will be a genderly balanced panel now.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a pleasure to be able to co-host this event this morning. Karim, thank you for a job well done. I will ask His Excellency the Minister if you would take your place next to Minister Hala, please. Right there. Thank you so much. So we start the discussion off the cuff this morning. I hope you will find it energizing. I hope you'll find it interesting. And I hope it will shed light on matters that might still be, to some extent, in the gray area. But we have an amazing panel, and I think we will do so much this morning. We will try to keep on time and on topic, and it's very much rapid fire. So I'm going to ask critical questions, and I'm sure we'll get excellent answers. Now, just for some context, the impact of climate change on countries across Africa and the developing world is well documented. Warming in Africa is projected to be higher than the global average, with the continent suffering impacts that exceed its adaptation capacity. These impacts have a cascading effect on crucial economic activities that directly impact GDP, food security, employment, and livelihoods, among others, with many, many, many left behind. Coherence, speed, and efficiency in greening national investment plans, which is led today by the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development of Egypt and Her Excellency Minister Hala El-Said, is not a best practice. It is a priority of existential importance, one that requires all hands on deck. Africa alone will need in the vicinity of actually $3 trillion by 2030 to cover mitigation and adaptation needs and implement national determined contributions. Today, we will take you on a marathon to discover how economic policy reforms, innovative financing, and cooperation across sectors and regions can help address challenges and create new opportunities. Once again, a warm welcome to our distinguished panels, and I'll just very quickly go through it again. So we have, of course, Dr. Hala El-Said, representing Egypt and the presidency of the COP. We have the Republic of Chad. We are proud to have Minister of Urbanism, Mr. Mohamed Halata. We have from Gabon, Minister of Decentralization, Cohesion and Development, Mr. Michel Menga Missone. From the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and also representing the G77 and China, we have Federal Minister for Planning, Development and Special Initiative, Professor Ihsan Iqbal, and of course, COP27 climate champion, Dr. Mahmoud Mohideen. I'll start with Dr. Hala El-Said. Dr. Hala, greening national investment plans. It's a complex and intricate matter that requires coherence, discipline, and higher levels of accountability across government, markets, and society. What do you project in your ambition and in your initiative, the work that you've already carried out? What do you project to be the greatest challenges, but also the greatest opportunities?
Thank you very much, Shireen. Actually, when we started having the environmental sustainability guidelines, and I thank my colleagues at the ministry, Dr. Gamil and others, for adopting these guidelines, because it was guidelines according to best practice. The main challenge was basically investing in human capital, because you need to change the mindset of people to start adopting this and embedding this in the investment plan. So we don't want this to be a sort of window dressing to the thing, or just a packaging of the investments that we have. We just wanted to a real greening of the investment projects. So this entailed a lot of capacity, real training, and when I say real capacity building, I always say we have to have the best quality, best trainers, best curriculum. So we had really to embark on a manual with the, all the guidelines and start having enhanced capacity building to all ministries. And then now it is adopting this as a national guidelines. The main partner is the private sector. We had to have private sector on board because they are the main partners, and they are the main drivers for economic growth in the countries. So with the alliance of business councils in Egypt, we started working with them to adopt this as the national guidelines, and now with Dr. Dalia and the Federation, the financial institutions are also financial intermediaries, the main financial intermediaries for development. So having this as the national guidelines and changing the mindset of people to look at the project, whether it's green or not, I think this was the main challenge. Actually, we were very lucky to have this during the COVID. So I always say that during challenges, it's always opportunities to embark and reform what you have. So we had these guidelines in 2019. We had a lot of capacity building, online capacity building, and actual physical capacity building in 2020. So we were able to monitor that and have a major shift from 15% green projects to reach 30% last year. This year we're targeting 40, and by 50% by the year 24-25. So in every challenge there is always lies a big opportunity, and we were lucky to have these challenges. We're working hard to increase all the opportunities that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Today you are extending a hand in friendship and collaboration to developing countries and especially to African countries. Tell us a little bit more about your intention, about how you want this to pan out in terms of ambitions for working together.
We have today a lot of developing and African countries, and also Pakistan is on board. So what we aim is targeting, we need to link different initiatives together. We had the initiative a few days ago. We launched Decent Life for Climate Resilient Africa. And I think this all goes in line, in tandem together. The Decent Life for Climate Resilient Africa, the gender initiative that Dr. Maya has launched also a few days ago. So coordinating and the coherence and the coordination and the partnership with different institutions, I think this will lead us to a better result, a better impact, and with a proper monitoring and evaluation system, I think the more we have partners, the more we have friends, we will be able to achieve and have better impact on all African countries.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Hala. And now I move to His Excellency Mohamed Halata of Chad. And I think some countries may prefer to speak in French, others in English. So if you do not speak French, feel free to have your earphones on. So my question to Minister Halata, Chad's journey in developing national sustainability policies evolved organically as well as strategically over a decade ago, perhaps even before the coining of some of the terminologies we use today. And it covers diverse frontiers from investment plans to urban development, disaster risk management, and ecosystems management. You also pay special attention to vulnerable communities. What has been the lessons learned during this journey, and in what ways do you believe intercontinental cooperation and South-South cooperation, as suggested by Egypt, how would that build value in your opinion?
D'abord, merci. Merci à tout le monde. Et merci aux autorités libyennes et notamment au ministère du Plan et du Développement d'avoir organisé tout cela et invité le Tchad à participer à un sujet qui est très, très important. Mais laissez-moi faire constater une chose, que je reste amer. Venant d'un pays du Sud, un pays d'Afrique comme le Tchad, depuis l'avènement du COP, si je mesure l'étendue jusqu'à maintenant, nous avons beaucoup parlé, mais peu réalisé. Les pays du Nord, qui eux sont responsables, je dirais peut-être à 80%, de ce changement climatique, de par leur consommation, ne sont pas encore conscients de la gravité de la situation qui nous attend plus tard. En Afrique, au Tchad, nous subissons ce problème de façon très grande et très dangereuse. Si j'innove un peu dans ma réflexion, nous au Tchad par exemple, nous avons fait des initiatives en essayant de créer des espaces verts, d'aller dans la politique un peu du vert pour pouvoir permettre à ce que la population puisse être consciente. Mais d'année en année, d'année en année, nous subissons de plein fouet ces conséquences-là. Je prends juste l'exemple de cette année. Vous savez, toutes les couches vulnérables, aussi précaires qu'elles soient, se trouvent dans une situation d'inondation qui n'est jamais arrivée depuis 1961. Nous avons au Tchad plus de 1 300 000 personnes déplacées à cause de l'inondation et à cause d'une pluviométrie abondante que le Tchad n'a jamais connue. Les villes sont menacées. Qui dit 1 300 000 personnes déplacées dit 200 000 plutôt, autant pour moi, de logements affectés. Sachant que une famille, c'est 6 personnes minimum, et vous savez très bien qu'en Afrique, une famille, ça va au-delà de ça. Donc 200 000 familles menacées, déplacées, affectées. Et heureusement qu'il y a des partenaires comme les PAM et les autres organisations non gouvernementales qui sont là sur place et qui essayent d'aider. Mais ce n'est pas suffisant. Il y a plus de 500 000 hectares de terre champêtre complètement engloutis et nettoyés. Voyez-vous, c'est une raison simple aujourd'hui qui nous pousse à venir au COP 27 et exprimer face au monde notre désarroi et les conséquences que nous subissons par rapport à ce climat, à ce changement climatique. Nous appelons aux partenaires de ne pas faire les grands discours, les beaux discours, parce qu'à chaque fois que nous nous trouvons ici ou ailleurs, ce sont les mêmes mots, ce sont les mêmes phrases qui reviennent dès qu'on quitte Sharm el-Sheikh ou ailleurs, on oublie et bis repetita au prochain COP. Je fais appel un peu à la conscience de ceux qui nous écoutent et aux partenaires qui peuvent vraiment venir investir, aider des pays comme le Tchad de pouvoir se distinguer et de prendre ce problème-là à bras le corps. Parce que si nous continuons comme ça, les peuples qui nous regardent croiront que nous sommes des clubs d'amis, nous venons nous réunir, parler, mais à la fin, nous ne faisons rien. Merci.
Dr. Mahideen, you can take one question before you go, a quick one? Or if you must go, we understand.
All right. If it is easy to answer, I'm happy to.
I'll make it easy.
Or short to answer.
I'll make it easy for you.
Okay.
Dr. Mahideen, the transition to a low-carbon resilient economy requires significant financial resources for developing countries, as we all said. Beyond development cooperation, what do countries need to do at the policy level in order to, one, mobilize and channel funds internally, two, attract sustainable private investment? Thank you.
Yeah, well, this is easy, but it would require an hour to answer, so... Okay, let me just try giving you some headlines on that. So, as presented by Her Excellency, the Minister of Planning and Economic Development, it takes a whole village really to implement this plan. As mentioned by President Eisenhower, plan is nothing, but planning is everything. So it's basically about the framework that this plan would be required. Good that we have this kind of platform at the national level that requires coordination, but needs really to have very strong link with the budget of the state, because this plan would require public finances. Then the kind of platform, regional or international, would share knowledge and perhaps may have some good connections on investment side. 3 quick tips on how to do it. One part, and this good discussion that we had in preparation of the Finance for Development for Sustainable Development exercise that we did for the Arab Republic of Egypt through sponsorship of the League of Arab States, that it starts actually with identification of gaps. The best way to do it, and it's good that Francesco is with us, is the integrated national financial framework that we need to have it. You need to identify gaps, and then you see how much will be the contribution from the public sources, private sector partnerships with a bit of innovation, and then to get the external finance in place. This is the first part. The second part is basically about identifying specific projects to implement the plan as it should be. And here we have some projects that could be with greater chance of implementation when they are identified. I think the drawing of that investment map for Egypt based on green and smart priorities could be of help, and this is beyond experimentation, because we are talking here about some real work in the field. And the final part is basically about the role of the non-state actors, including the aggregators. At any stage of development, you need the Federation of Banks, the Federation of Capital Market Participants, the Federation of Industries, and the Chamber of Commerce, and the associations responsible for investments, and in the spirit of partnership, because you will be finding that leveraging is the only way to get that done. That would require stronger collaboration with the private sector, identifying areas of work, stopping immediately any kind of crowding out, enhancing the opportunities through support, and you will be finding some simple but complicated notion to be resolved. It's not just about finance and supply-demand dynamics, it's basically about the capacity development in the field from the local areas to the national, and then when we go regional, definitely this area of collaboration and knowledge sharing will be very much required. Here I think the friends of the greening of the national budget, linking the whole thing to the NDCs, getting KPIs attached to this, simplifying the language to the rest of the participants will be the first steps for implementation. And again, providing regular updates in a year of implementation, starting actually when the Minister of Foreign Affairs announced the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda. I think quarterly update of what worked and what didn't could be a good starting point for engaging the private sector and the civil society at large with governments behind the initiatives. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhyiddin. I'll take this moment to acknowledge the government of Saudi Arabia, its presence in the session with Dr. Adil Al-Zahrani, Deputy Minister of Urban Planning and Lands. So welcome, sir. We continue our discussion, and I'm very happy to go to Gabon. Now, Gabon enjoys not only rare beauty, but also wealth. In addition to the invaluable rainforest and wildlife made up of antelope, gorillas, tropical birds, and actually several species of elephant, the country enjoys a per capita income 4 times that of most sub-Saharan African nations. The industrial growth rate is approximately 4.8%. Greening local development plans has been a feature of Gabon's national strategy, and there's a lot to be learned from their experience and many things that we can collaborate on. Your Excellency, tell me more about this work and how it helps the country develop while safeguarding natural capital and addressing inequalities. There is no translation? There is no translation? Do you want to use this? It works?
Je voudrais À l'entame de mon propos, je voudrais d'abord remercier le docteur Alad El Saïd, ministre de la Planification du Développement économique de l'Égypte, pour l'invitation qu'il a adressée à mon pays depuis que nous sommes là. Ça nous a donné l'occasion de découvrir ce si beau pays que nous ne connaissions que dans les livres. Nous avons eu l'opportunité de fouler le sol égyptien. C'est un honneur pour nous. Et nous voudrions le dire pleinement que nous sommes heureux d'être ici, dans cette ville qu'on peut qualifier d'une ville écologique, parce que depuis que je circule à travers le monde, les pays que j'ai eu l'occasion de visiter, je n'ai jamais connu un environnement aussi agréable. La deuxième chose que je voudrais dire, c'est que, comme vous le savez, le Gabon, notre pays, appartient au golfe de Guinée. Le golfe de Guinée qui est le deuxième poumon mondial. Nous sommes insérés dans ce poumon-là. Et les activités que nous essayons de mener au niveau de l'État, par le chef de l'État lui-même, c'est justement de contribuer à préserver cet écosystème qui est riche et qui est naturel. Nous devons donc, dans ce cadre-là, engager des opérations de sensibilisation de la population gabonaise. Parce que ce que nous avons au Gabon, qui est couvert à 80% de forêt, est un don de Dieu. Il nous faut donc apprendre à le préserver. Pour le préserver, il faut associer les hommes et les femmes du Gabon. Et l'association de ces hommes et femmes gabonaises pour la préservation de l'environnement, c'est par le biais de l'implication des collectivités locales de notre pays que nous passons. Nous pensons que les maires et les présidents des conseils départementaux qui encadrent les territoires, qui sont responsables des territoires, que ces hommes et messieurs peuvent nous permettre de toucher les populations afin de les amener à changer de comportement pour que l'environnement qui est le nôtre, que nous aimons bien, soit préservé. Donc les actions que nous menons vont dans ce sens. Je voudrais ici simplement rappeler que le président de la République a mis en place un fonds d'initiative départementale. Ce fonds d'initiative départementale intègre justement les démarches qui visent à préserver l'environnement. C'est un fonds que le président a mis en place et que le gouvernement suit au quotidien avec l'implication des collectivités locales pour que cet objectif que nous poursuivons de conscientiser, d'amener les maires et les conseils départementaux à aider le gouvernement, à sensibiliser les populations, a besoin d'un appui des autres pays à travers le monde, parce que nous sommes sûrs que nous, tout seuls, nous ne pouvons pas y parvenir. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous profitons de notre passage ici et de la COP actuellement pour inciter les pays amis à nous aider à développer ces activités-là qui sont importantes pour nous, parce qu'on ne peut préserver l'environnement que si les hommes et les femmes que nous sommes avons conscience de ce que ça représente. Et nous avons le sentiment que, notamment dans notre pays, que beaucoup de Gabonaises et de Gabonais n'ont pas encore pris conscience de l'intérêt qu'il y a à préserver l'environnement de notre pays. Nous nous battons donc pour cela et nous sollicitons la coopération internationale pour nous aider à continuer, à persister dans ce domaine-là, parce que nous pensons que c'est la voie du salut dans notre pays. La nature, c'est bien, mais l'effort que nous-mêmes, les humains, nous devons accomplir est nécessaire et j'allais dire indispensable. Et c'est dans cette perspective-là que nous travaillons. Nous espérons que le temps que nous passons avec vous nous aidera à faire comprendre, à prendre conscience des préoccupations qui sont les nôtres pour nous aider à conduire ce bateau qui n'est pas simple. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. I move to Professor Ehsan Iqbal. Pakistan has been at the epicenter of climate change. Total damage estimated is at over $30 billion, 10% of Pakistan's GDP. 1/3 of the country is underwater. Over 1,400 people lost their lives due to climate change, and 5 million acres of crops have been destroyed. As chair of G77 and China, Pakistan called for enhanced technical cooperation and infrastructure development to address the climate crisis. I want to know from you, how does the call for greater alignment in greening national investment planning made today by Minister Hala Saeed, and this call for cooperation among developing countries, how can that tackle some of the challenges that we are facing, I think collectively as a developing world, but maybe with specific reference to Pakistan as a country and to the group of 77 and China as a group?
Thank you very much, Dr. Hala Al-Saeed, Minister for Planning and Economic Development, fellow ministers, distinguished participants. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Hala Al-Saeed for inviting me, and also I would compliment her and her ministry for initiating a very important step. This cooperation and collaboration among friends of greening national investment plans is need of the hour. Just as it was mentioned that Pakistan is now a major victim of climate disaster. Many in the West used to say that climate change is a fiction. But if you come to our country, 33 million people who directly became victim of the climate disaster, and 220 million people of the country who indirectly face the consequences of this disaster will tell you it's not just a reality, but it's a nightmare. It can take away everything from people in a matter of hours. And they can be out on streets, standing and searching for place to bury their dead. For hundreds of kilometers, they will not find dry piece of land where they can have graves for their dear ones who became victim of the floods. So this is a very big reality of our time, and I think we are passing through defining period which will decide, based on our response, the future of life on planet Earth. If we all as inhabitants of this planet Earth did not wake up, I think it will be great injustice to our children and future generations whose lives will be seriously compromised, not just in the south, but equally in the north. So the challenge we face right now, as it was pointed out in a study, I am a management student, so there was a study from Princeton University in which some professors pointed out that organizations become sick when they have a huge knowing-doing gap. They know a lot, but they are not able to put that knowledge into practice. And that is the sad reality of climate change. There is ample scientific data available for us to act immediately, but there is apathy and there is inaction. And this knowing-doing gap is not narrowing, actually is growing. There is more talk and less action. And that puts millions and millions of people living in those countries which are vulnerable. My country only emits less than 1% of global emissions. We contribute less than 1% to global warming, but we are the 7th most vulnerable country for climate change. Yes, we are very much focused on greening our national investments. But there is a paradox that we face. No matter what effort I do or we do as a nation, there is no way that we can control the rising temperatures which will stop more moisture in the space that will cause less rainfall and flooding. There is no way that we can control the rising global warming that will melt the glaciers in the north of the country and put our people at risk of flash floods. There is no way that we can control 51-degree temperature that hit us before the floods, and that brought huge wildfires in the forests that burned thousands of acres of forest. So there is this paradox that how much can we do to control the vulnerability that we have? And the responsibility for this lies elsewhere. So let us today, I think, therefore agree that the developing countries which have very limited resources after COVID, after supply shock, and after inflation that has hit us, we are all very constrained because of what Dr. Mahmood said, that there is an unfair, insufficient, and ineffective international financial system to help us. So we have to now focus on the efficiency of our investments going towards greening our economies. Now, that requires sharing of ideas. That requires sharing of research. And I think this partnership of Friends of Greening National Investment is very important. We have to share with each other our success stories. We have to share with each other our failures so that each one of us is not reinventing the wheel. In Pakistan, we have made it mandatory for every development project to pass environmental criteria. In Pakistan, we launched in Vision 2025 that was started in 2014, the goal of having a green economy on which we have made many successes. We launched a Green Pakistan initiative under which $1 billion plus plantation has been done to increase forestry, and recently government has launched 10,000 megawatt solar energy initiative to make the transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy to make our energy green. We also have started a new initiative. Unfortunately, this climate change was a double tragedy for us. Not only it hit 33 million people, but it hit the poorest of the poor areas in Pakistan. So now we are starting a new initiative of rebuilding 20 poorest districts in Pakistan on the model of sustainable development so that these areas not only come back to life, but they become future model of sustainable development in Pakistan. So in the end, because I understand there is shortage of time, though I can be as brief as possible no matter how long it takes, but still I would like to end here by saying that, my message here to the 20%, I'm sure most of you have heard the 20-80 rule. In anything you do, 20% of your effort gives you 80% result. And 80% of the things contribute to 20% of the results. So we represent the 80% of the people who make less than 20% contribution to global warming. So the message is to the 20% who make 80% plus contribution to global warming. Don't wait for climate change to hit your door. Don't wait for climate change to hit your home. You must be proactive and learn lesson from the millions who have lost everything, because we are a tiny fraction in the global economy. But if you are hit by this disaster, you will not only have a high cost for yourself, but you will also bring down the global economy. So you have greater responsibility to contribute towards making sure that global warming can be stopped, mitigated, and those countries that are vulnerable, they are able to stand up on their feet with your investment in research, with your cooperation in helping them rebuild resilient and adaptable infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Abdal. Well, it's time now to swiftly turn to our high-level technical panel, who we are very pleased to have today. And I'd like to start with Craig Hansen, the World Resources Institute Managing Director. Perhaps I can receive some help from Mariam in moving the microphone. Thank you very much. I think you can stay. We are going to take it from the floor for the sake of time. Or you'd rather? Okay. Very well. Thank you so much, Minister. Thank you so very much indeed. So let me then invite our technical panel, World Resources Institute Managing Director and Vice President Craig Hansen, UN Capital Development Fund Director of Transformative Finance, David Jackson, UN Economic and Technical Commission for West Asia, Water and Climate Lead, Dr. Tariq Sadiq, Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment, Executive Director, Carlos Sanchez, Commercial International Bank Chief Sustainability Officer, Dr. Dalia Abdel Qadir, Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure, Amit Prothi, and the African Export-Import Bank Africa Director, Youssef Dayab. Please take your place on the panel. And I'm requesting our audience to please take your seats because we are continuing with the conversation. Now, I would like to start with the World Resources Institute. Director Craig Hansen, and I'm requesting the audience to please take their seats. Thank you so much. If you'd be seated. We'll give them a second to settle down. Okay, to stay on time, I'm going to request everyone, please, to take their seats so that we can give the attention to our panelists for the important messages we're about to share. Thank you very much. So we presented this morning at a high-level policy frameworks and viewpoints on how to move forward in terms of cooperation and building alliances and working together towards greening national investment plans. A priority and a most suitable topic to start Solutions Day with, because integrated solutions, it's everything. And you can only achieve integrated solutions for nature, for climate resilience, through that kind of planning in a holistic manner. The question now is how? How do we actually do it? And we cannot think of a better panel, better experts than the ones we have right here, and that governments, policymakers need to reach to say, help us, tell us how to do it. So this is the question, how do we do it? So I will start with the World Resources Institute, a close collaborator of many of the institutions and governments that were here today, including the UN Environment Programme that I represent. And I would like to ask you, Craig, what kind of tools does WRI provide to empower countries green their national investment plans?
Thank you very much. There we go. There we go. Now you can hear. Great. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be invited to speak today, and World Resources Institute is pleased to be a friend of greening national investment plans. So congratulations to all in assessing this and building this out. For those of you who don't know, World Resources Institute is a global think tank that works at the intersection of human development and the environment. In terms of your question on how, I think a couple things to think about here. When it comes to greening national investment plans, one thing there are three things I think that are really important to really helping drive the agenda. First of all, it's about clarity. And I think what we need to make sure is that green national investment plans really and strongly articulate what's the objective and goal they're trying to achieve in terms of not just economic development, but also climate mitigation, climate resilience, biodiversity conservation, water security, you name it, right? So there's an element here of clarity. Secondly, they need to coordinate. An effective green national investment plan is one that actually helps to align all the major government agencies so they actually work together towards a common objective. And thirdly, it's about channeling. A green national investment plan needs to have mechanisms for channeling the financial flows so it actually gets to the initiatives and the projects that need to be invested. So 3 C's: clarify, coordinate, and channel. Those would be my suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and I'm sure we'll come back to you in a second. But first, I would like to go to my colleague, Dr. Tariq Sadiq of the UN Economic and Technical Commission for West Asia. How do you see ESCWA's role in supporting the initiative led by Egypt, and in what ways will this improve, for example, renewable energy uptake in the Arab world, which still lags behind?
Thanks, Dr. Shireen. First, ESCWA is really honored to be a friend of this ambitious initiative and very interesting one, because it really matches with our work during the past years. One of the examples that Dr. Mahmoud Mohiddin mentioned, that how we can make finance with projects, how we can develop investable projects. And this is what we did in Beirut with Investment Forum, where we developed many projects. Many of them can be classified as green projects. And we had a dialogue between developers of projects and donors and multilateral banks. So we proposed these projects by Dr. Mahmoud to the GFANs. Other initiatives, innovative ones that we can work on, is improve quality and quantity of finance flows in the region. If we know that we receive only 6% of global adaptation fund in the Arab region, and when we look at sectors, energy and transport get about 44% of the total finance flow, while agriculture and water get 21%. So we are low in adaptation, and we need to improve adaptation, and especially the flows to least developed countries. They are always lacking the funds. One of the initiatives we are doing to help medium income countries in getting fund is debt swap, debt for climate and SDGs swap, how countries can swap their debt interest by working on projects with donors and other developed countries on climate project to swap their debts and relieve the burden on their fiscal budget. The other thing, most of the finance needs to be improved in quality. Most of it is in terms of loan. In the Arab region, we reached $1.3 trillion as debt. So we need to work more on adaptation fund, especially concessional loans and grants, and to focus more on adaptation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tariq. I just want to tell our audience we might have time for 1 or 2 interventions or questions at the end. So start thinking about it if you would like to share with us your thoughts, your ideas, or questions to our panel. Now I move, and with great pleasure, that I'm happy to introduce Dr. Dalia Abdelkader. Dr. Dalia Abdelkader is from the Commercial International Bank, and she is Chief Sustainability Officer.
Well, thank you so much. It's really quite special to be here today, launching the greening of national investments, as we are witnessing the final days of COP27 Sharm el-Sheikh. This new initiative is bringing new momentum, energy, and sense of empowerment to Africa and developing countries to own their own solution and their own destiny. And for this, I deeply appreciate the efforts of Her Excellency Dr. Hala Saeed for her genuine efforts and that of her team for launching this initiative for Africa and developing countries. This being said, I'm here as representing Egypt's largest private sector bank, Commercial International Bank, but also, as Her Excellency mentioned, as chair of the Sustainable Finance Committee of the Federation of Egyptian Banks that includes 37 banks, and we have the honor and pleasure to be part of this initiative. Let me start by emphasizing, true, we have been repeating that Africa is a victim of a crisis that is not its making. But let us determine that Africa will own the solution. Africa will be the maker of the solution that gets it out. This is the starting point of what I want to say. I think the Egyptian financial sector right now is enacting Central Bank of Egypt guidelines to mandate all banks in Egypt to implement sustainable finance. And on behalf of the chair of the Federation of Egyptian Banks, Mr. Mohammed Al-Itrabi, 37 banks are part of this initiative. Let me zoom on one bank, Commercial International Bank, and very briefly share with you what we can contribute to this initiative. We have 3 initiatives online, 2 mitigation projects and 1 adaptation. 2 mitigation projects that already started and have a track record of success, and we hope that with this initiative we can join forces with other banks in Africa to scale and mainstream. The first is climate finance innovation. We successfully launched Egypt's first green bond. Under the green bond, we have several projects. Let me share with you that in 1 year, we had projects that caused or brought about material impact represented in 200 gigawatt hour in energy savings, 40 million cubic meters in water savings, around 15 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions reduction. So this is just one green bond for one bank, okay, or also under EPAP program. The second is sustaining sector, whereby we are helping. It's a platform to help all sectors in Egypt transform and go through the decarbonization pathway. It's an integrated platform. The third, which was launched on the first day of the Finance Day, is the Brain Trust. It's about adaptation. Adaptation is a challenge. However, we cannot wait while we aspire that COP27 will address climate issues and unlock the $100 billion. Africa cannot afford to be in waiting. Right now, we have around 250 million facing starvation and drought. And Brain Trust is about targeting private sector and empowering private sector banks in Africa to work on packaging investable projects that attract the trillions of dollars. As the minister has rightfully said, adaptation has a business case. We need to frame it, and we need to target trillions of dollars because, again, we cannot afford to wait. Brain Trust is about establishing self-sufficient and sustainable food systems in Africa. So if one bank can do something, imagine 729 banks in Africa, if they come together with their ecosystem, what they can do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a follow-up question, actually. How complex is it to change the banking culture in Egypt and Africa?
In less than a minute. It is very doable. It needs a systemic approach. We already went through the process through a very structured approach. The whole bank is there right now. What we're working on is sharing this system transformation with our clients through the sustaining sector. So if you just have, we have the recipe, and there are other banks around in Africa and South Africa and Kenya and Morocco. They're very much ahead. If we just have a continent-based plan for the banking sector alone to transform, you can transform Africa before COP28. I assure you of that, if this is done.
We will hold you to that. Thank you so much indeed. We'll come back to the banking sector in a second, but first I want to talk about infrastructure. And I want to talk about integrated solutions. So I will go for the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, Amit Proti. Now, modern infrastructure is an obstacle sometimes. The establishment, the readily available modern infrastructure, it's one of the obstacles to the deployment of greener technologies in Africa and the developing world, slowing down the ability of some countries to leapfrog to where they need to be in terms of development and meeting sustainability goals. Examples are in infrastructure for sustainable lighting, electric vehicles, buildings, for example. So, and we've witnessed actually very recently a situation where the market leader in, say, sustainable lighting was selling non-mercury products in Europe by law, but in Africa, although the company said we are committed, but there are no incentives, there are no policies, and there is competition from certain parts of the world, like China, for example, producing cheap fluorescent lighting and selling it in Africa. We had to, at the forum, we had to do a mammoth effort in order to work together, to consult, and in order to say, look, how can we resolve this? And one big issue has been infrastructure. The buildings are not fit for the... So how can we bridge that incredible gap? And very quickly, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shireen. That's an excellent question. And partly because we are sitting in a place which is rapidly developing. I'm coming from India. I've spent about the last 25 years working across 15, 20 countries. The pace of infrastructure development differs from location to location. And because we are in a place where we are rapidly developing, we don't want to end up making the same mistakes of what I would call the 20th century infrastructure. So what is the 21st century infrastructure? How do we start to make sure we're not making the same mistakes? The Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, it's set up by 31 member countries under the leadership of the Indian government. We have the US, we've got Chile, Brazil, a number of countries. We've got UNDP, World Bank, etc., all saying, let's look at new methods of transformation. For us, what we're trying to do is how do we provide that technical support, that sharing of solutions, that sharing of knowledge, that developing of curriculum for the next generation. I mean, I'll use my gray hair as an example to say, an engineer who was trained 25, 30 years ago only knows how to solve the problem in a certain way. Maybe the next generation needs to look at it differently. So we are trying to push a lot of emphasis on newer curriculum, bringing in the understanding of risk. When we talk about making the same mistakes, there's two parts to look at it. One, are we understanding the risks? When you're actually talking about greening national investment plans, do you actually know where you should and should not be putting your infrastructure? So how do you actually bring that information up to a country level? We're actually trying to work with the UNEP and a number of other agencies to come up with a global resilient infrastructure, status of the global resilient infrastructure, where we're pulling up hazard types, 6 different hazard types, to just start to inform countries, understand your risks. Let's make risks more transparent. So that's one side of it. Second side of it is how do you push for new solutions? You tell an engineer to solve a flooding problem and he'll put a concrete wall. Well, concrete has a lot of issues, as we already recognize. So how do you bring in other solutions? Everybody talks about nature-based solutions. Well, how do you do it? So we've actually just launched a fund on the 9th. So Dr. Mayuddin was in my office 3 weeks ago, and he said, this is the COP for solutions. So we've launched a trust fund. The intention is technical assistance and capacity building to support new solutions in adaptation. I just came in late here because at 9 o'clock, I launched a call for proposals for the small island development states, again, on technical assistance and capacity building. So curriculum, training the next generation, more and more and more examples of how do you understand risk and how do you plan the next generation of infrastructure. That's not 20th century, but that's 21st century.
Thank you so much and congratulations for the launch. Just a reminder that a continuation of this discussion, looking in depth into public-private partnerships, the role of the private sector in infrastructure and working with government, collaboration with the banking systems, is going to happen today in this very room at 5:30. We're going to have the top players in industry from Google, IBM, Signify, and more. We're going to have most of the private sector companies here. We're going to have governments here who have found Namibia, they've done amazing in terms of how they are moving their economy. And I think this discussion is very much related to that. I wish that we could have had them on a longer day. Promise you we will in our next session, perhaps in another country, perhaps during COP28, but hopefully before that. So moving on, I want to go back to the banking sector. And Yusuf Daya, the African Export-Import Bank. I want to ask you about just transitions. We chatted about just transitions. How do you see just transitions for Africa and the developing world in terms of meeting climate goals, and how to ensure that these transitions do not impact negatively on staying within the 1.5 degrees target?
Thank you very much, Dr. Shireen, and let me also at the outset express my appreciation to the Ministry for the invitation extended to us. I know we had a brief discussion about this yesterday, and at the risk of being controversial about it again, I was listening to the discussions this morning, and a recurring theme coming out from the discussions is that the financing is just not there. It's not being made available for Africa to achieve a just transition. I'm going to rehash some of the numbers very quickly. 600 million. That's the number of people in Africa that need energy. That is almost twice the total population of the United States and 1.3 times the population of the European Union. Africa's population is expected to double by 2050 and triple by 2100. This will mean even more people need energy to cook their meals, light their homes, undertake business, travel. The scale of financing required, and I think a few of the speakers spoke about it, the scale of financing required over the next decade is estimated at 2.5 trillion. Now, just to put that into context, that would mean Africa would have to invest 10% of its collective GDP annually to achieve that. In 2019-2020, Africa received 20 billion in climate financing. 20 billion out of a need of 250 billion annually. The emissions reduction expected should therefore be seen in the context of this Africa's development and its need to ensure a just transition. So what we are saying is that in the absence of provision of adequate financing and in the context of a fiscally strained environment, how are we supposed to close this energy gap for our people? The potential of renewable energy in Africa is indisputable. It's vast. African governments have in fact tripled their investments in renewables over the last decade, from 13.4 billion to 47 billion. There's also substantial potential remains untapped. 5 of the 10 countries at the global level with the potential to generate the most energy per solar panel are in Africa. But realizing such potential requires that climate pledges exceed the meager 3% that is coming to Africa currently. And also, renewables alone cannot deliver the low-cost, reliable electricity that the continent requires to industrialize. The continent is struggling with a drive to industrialize and to deliver the public services, education, health, that's needed for Africa's development. But yet Africa sits on a wealth of natural resources that can drive its development. We sit on around 500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, 150 billion barrels of oil. And yet we are being asked to withdraw. Now just to give this, I'll try to be quick, to give this some context. We contribute less than 4% of global emissions. We generate 40.5% of our current electricity from renewable resources. The resources, the fossil fuels that Africa have been extracting have been utilized by other parts of the world to develop their economies using our resources. Isn't it time we are allowed to use our own resources to develop our economies equally? So Africa has, if we are already doing 40.5% using renewable sources, we have significant wiggle room, I'd like to say wiggle room, to use our resources to enable development and a transition, enable a development that will allow us to transition to renewable energy in a fair and measured way. So from the bank's perspective, we see a few initiatives as critical to support this. The first one I want to mention is the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is to enhance intra-African trade, encourage the utilization of resources in Africa. Simply by increasing trade with each other, we reduce our carbon footprint in terms of having to export raw materials, import processed goods. That is one. The second one is the bank is establishing an energy transition bank. And this bank will establish new sources of financing, particularly for natural gas, as a fair transition fuel for the continent. We can then focus on renewable energy with an emphasis on resilience, adaptation, and mitigation. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. Now, I'm going to move to Carlos, and perhaps let me start with this. What do you think?
Thank you very much, Shireen, for the wonderful chairing and moderation, and thank you to government Egypt for the fantastic and true leadership in this space. We are honored, pleased, grateful, encouraged, and motivated to be part of this very important initiative. And I can say already that TCRI makes available all its IP and solutions immediately for the benefit and our own learning too, because there is a lot of that. I wanted to start, and the focus is on solutions, and we don't have much time, but I'm gonna be playing my luck a little bit and taking a step back into the why. So not the what and the how, but the why, because I think that we are all hearing absolutely wonderful contributions to that, and that is that we want to protect value from physical climate risk. And there are many different definitions of value that we are discussing. There is the macroeconomic value, absolutely crucial, paramount. There is a social value that we need to protect, equally important. There is a natural ecosystem value, and then there is the private value, the more, let's say, risk-adjusted return view of the world. And in any of those, what we are showcasing today is that as of today, it is not, let's call it the moral standards, it is the decision-making standards that are not properly bringing us the benefit function to the cost function. The cost function is straightforward. We know what we spend, but what we get in exchange, we are struggling to capture, and there is so much that needs to be unpacked. The complexity here, or the true tragedy, is that this represents a monumental challenge to most vulnerable countries, because effectively what you could be delivering while engaging into very analytical applications is almost like a penalization. And that is the absolute last thing that we have and must deliver to countries. So in other words, we need to deliver fiscal space. And that is our absolute most rigid measure of success instead of fiscal constraint. With that in mind, that begs for an application of that cost-benefit rationale into very different set of decision-making standards. And it is not, broadly speaking, private and public. It is within the private, a pension fund, a fund manager, a bank, a rating agency, an engineering firm, climate risk data analytics. And on the public, it is a Minister of Finance, a Minister of Planning, and multilateral, international. That is the starting point for the coalition. We were launched in 2019, just minutes away from our twin initiative and very good friends at CDRI. And we were born with the determination to mobilize true collaboration across all this, now representing 27 trillion in financial assets, active, committed, engaged, to develop those solutions that will prove to be effective in not just getting good feedback or a good report, in mobilizing investment, in defining what is a good benchmark for a good location, a good investment. And that is where we have mobilized solutions in two key spaces: government solutions, where we enable the identification, prioritization of where a unit of fiscal capacity will deliver the most protection and the most enhancement of national value, which today we struggle to obtain. And that is the points made before. It's not about the quantity only, it's the quality. It's how do we know that that unit is the most effective in delivering what we need in exchange. So we are delivering prioritization solutions at the national investment level, with that also metrics, because one can believe very strongly that your solutions are very credible and that prioritization is true, but unless we see a true metric for decision making, be it a proxy for sovereign credit quality, be it a proxy for foreign direct investment, for natural protection, you are not providing that element of incentive, and which is real.
Are you referring to metrics that hold the private sector accountable, or the governments accountable, or both?
Both and none. So both in the sense that deliver to both, but none in the sense that these metrics are first and foremost to provide a benchmark for quality rather than benchmark for penalization. So these metrics are aimed to reward and recognize good practices in the space of integrating this risk. But then from there, what we need is an end-to-end solution. We need to have solutions that deliver from national planning, understanding, systemic exposure, prioritization, asset design, and on that we also have a framework developed with leading engineers, pension funds, infrastructure asset managers, rating agencies, banks, multilaterals, tested with 5 real transactions where we establish, we believe, one of the first connectivities between CapEx and the value and performance of the asset over its duration. At the end of the day, and I assume I have to finish, where we are measuring all of this, we have 35 investors already interested in attracting these solutions. We have a wonderful partnership with the government of Jamaica, their first application of the national planning, but discussing with 6 other wonderful jurisdictions. But at the end of the day, what we measure success is with capital mobilization. And that's where we have a capital mobilization phase, where we are putting in place financial instruments, financial vehicles, and a series of collective actions that are helping that capital that is starting to understand that is not only a moral obligation, but it's actually a strategic opportunity to invest in those countries that indeed they are solid quality sovereigns for the next 20 years. A lot to be done, and that's where this conversation and the leadership of Egypt is very encouraging. A lot of work to be done, but I stop there.
Absolutely, and continues. Thank you so very much indeed. We're about to close. I have one question for Craig, actually, before we close, but I just wanted to see any questions from the floor or any comments from the floor. We have one. We have 2. I can take one more. Okay, so we have 2. 3. Okay, and that's it. Thank you so much. But before that, I'll ask my question, and then we will go to the Ministry of Planning to close the session. So, Craig, we talked about tools, and it was very interesting, obviously, listening to the panel with so many different points of view, and also so many solutions on the table, different perspectives on which investments, where to go, how to do it. Now, talking about tools, and I hope you can help me here, what about accountability tools? Not only for the private sector, which we hear quite a lot about and which still require a lot of work in terms of accountability, metrics, understanding performance and how our performance is impacting actually the environment. But what about policy metrics and policy tools to try and look at policies from an accountability point of view?
Yeah, definitely such tools are in need, and some tools do exist, right, to look at basically to what degree is the private sector and the public sector actually following through on their commitments for finance, the flow of finance, and then also the types of policies that are being put in place. There are some UN agencies that are doing this. WRI does this as well about every year, kind of around the times of these COPs, to kind of give a picture of where is the world in terms of following through in terms of finance, and then giving some articulation of what really are the gaps and what might be done to actually fill those gaps. I think we need to continue having that steady drumbeat to keep the pressure on for entities to follow through in terms of the financing.
And what kind of inputs are you getting? Are you getting enough data?
We get some data, right? Some from outside in. You also get some from as you survey the various countries. Obviously, more data. Analysts would always like more data, right? But there's a lot of data you can start with. And part of the pressure comes from actually when there is lack of data, that actually points to something as a gap that in itself can then stimulate the need to actually generate that data.
Finally, financial flows. So there are many indicators. We have environmental indicators across all the SDGs. Countries report 58% of the data is missing, either because of quality data is not there or just the data is not there, capacity issues or whatever. But when it comes to financial flows and reporting from member states on how they are spending their money, how much do we know about that? And this is linked obviously to issues related to transparency, for example.
There's some data. Some of the data is also murky, right? You get data about a certain financial flow, but is it really addressing mitigation or adaptation or not, right? It's hard to tell. And then some data then is very clear. So there is data. We're all in the research community working as much as we can with what's already there. But we are also at the same time articulating where the gaps are. And what we need is we need the private sector and the public sector to be forthcoming and forthright with that missing data. Because it's not necessarily a negative thing. Actually, having the better data actually is in the interest of countries and the private sector, because then we can know what's working and what's not working, which is the benefit for everyone.
Thank you very much indeed. So we will go to the floor. Can you put your hand up, please, again, those who wanted to ask a question or to make a comment? Okay, so I'll start with the lady over there. Maybe somebody can help me move the microphone around. Introduce yourself and your organization, and very, very quickly, please.
Thank you. So my name is Mutumboy Mundia, and I come from Zambia, from the Securities and Exchange Commission. I have a question for Doc. You did mention in terms of the very good works that you're doing as the banking community. When I look at the setup back in our markets, which are really infant in terms of the capital markets, you tend to see the banks are quite not very active in the capital markets. I wanted to get a sense of what the situation in the case of Egypt is, and whether indeed the banking sector is active in the capital markets, because I wanted you to rehash the statement that if the banking sector was to be decisive, these issues can be resolved in no time. Is it just the banking sector, or are you playing with the capital markets as well?
Definitely, you're very right and very insightful that when we talk about finance, it's the financial market, including the banking sector, the capital market, and insurance. And thank you for bringing this over, but maybe because I represent the banking sector, I just focus on that. But definitely in Egypt, there's an adequate degree of maturity on part of the capital market. Actually, Egypt was a founder of sustainability stock exchanges back in 2012, and the insurance are very much ahead. However, the synergies is not yet there, all right? But I think now, with the Financial Regulatory Authority issuing its binding guidelines for all listed companies to report on sustainability and climate change, and with the Central Bank of Egypt mandating all banks to adopt very progressive and comprehensive sustainable finance measures, I think there will be synergies. That's why I'm very much optimistic. While we talk about adaptation and public funding, personally, after 27 rounds of COP negotiations, we cannot depend much on public. I hope they are forthcoming. However, witnessing 250 million, as their excellencies mentioned, Chad and Gabon, 250 million Africans on the brink of starvation and drought, while we know that Africa has resources, I think there is a new role for commercial banks, for financial institutions. I appreciate your correction, to step in and broaden the role to target $379 trillion there in the global financial system. We just need less than 1% for adaptation in Africa. And this is very doable. I mean, I really crave to have a side meeting with the panel, because if we are together, we are a couple of steps ahead. Thank you.
And we crave to have you all in our next sessions around the world. Now, we will take two more. I have somebody here. Someone changed their mind? No? So, Yusuf, you had a question. Introduce yourself, please, and ask your question.
Thank you. I'm Yusuf Habali. I'm a Sustainable Development Specialist from University of Sussex. And my question is to Yusuf Daya from the African Import and Export Bank. Since you talked about just energy transitions and energy justice in Africa, currently there are more than 200 companies from US, EU, and China that are mining fossil fuels and natural gas in Africa. How can we ensure that this transition is going to be just and not all of that wealth is going to be accumulated in these countries that has already established its development? Thank you.
You're talking about exploitation, excavation, mining, rather than using the energy for Africa, which is part of the bigger loss and damage, and quite controversial, but...
No, I think one of the points I made is that, traditionally the challenge in Africa has been we don't trade much with each other. We've been reliant on external markets, and it's exposed us to volatility. We have these companies coming in. But I think with the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area and an integrated market of 1.3 billion people, collective GDP of around $3 trillion, the economies of scale create an opportunity for these companies to service the local market and retain some of that wealth within the local economies. Certainly, it's not something that you're going to achieve overnight. It's a difficult discussion. But what we're seeing, I'll give you an example of what's currently happening in the fertilizer market, where a lot of African fertilizer producers have long-term contracts externally, yet we are suffering for fertilizer within the continent. There needs to be a collective voice that puts pressure at the global level, whether it be at the G20, the G7, to say that release some of that contracts, make sure that those products are servicing the African market where it's desperately needed. And similarly on fossil fuels, if there is a fossil fuel, there needs to be local content requirements that allows the development of the local industry.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Ahmed Kamali, Deputy Minister of Planning and Economic Development, to give us final words to close this session, representing Her Excellency Minister Hala Said. And as you come up, I will just say a very warm thank you to our panel. And you've been incredibly generous. You showed us not only the what, but you showed us the how, the pitfalls, and how to overcome some of them. And I just want to say very much thank you to our audience for your engagement. COP27 is coming to a close. Let's hope the negotiations go in the right direction, and see you very soon in COP28. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. In conclusion of this session, I would like to thank you all for the informative and important discussion, for the best practices and the success stories that you have shared with us, and your valuable insights that you have provided. Your participation and your readiness to support this very important initiative is extremely highly appreciated. Today, it's marked the beginning of our work, not the end. Over the coming period, you'll be hearing from us, because we want to build on your insights, your stories, your success stories, in order to bring this initiative forward. And as we said in COP27, this is a COP for implementation. We will need to implement this very important initiative. So we're going to work together toward this aim. And we're going to make this initiative fully operational, inshallah, by COP28. Thank you very much.